Morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here with coffee. Today is Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2025. And wrapping up the week here on coffee. Big day around the Gamecocks, and certainly for all the stuff we do here on Chief Sports South Carolina, also on thebigspur.com. John Whittle, talked to him yesterday, has been working around the clock because it's opening day for Carolina baseball. And this opening day has a little more significance than maybe some previous ones. You have the Paul Mainieri era starting. That's exciting. Anytime you have a new coach and you get to game time, especially one as accomplished as Coach Mainieri, that's exciting for your program. And you know, with the Mark Kingston era, I sort of went back and forth on him. I think that at the end of the day, standards were not being met consistently enough, and they had to make a change, and that's perfectly okay. I think obviously the search was kind of one of those where right at the end, Paul Mainieri's name pops up and he gets the job, and it follows the same sort of pattern throughout the history of the athletics program here, where sometimes in football and in basketball, you go and get a guy that's won it all somewhere else. And I think that that's something that you don't necessarily have to do all the time at South Carolina anymore. I think it's worked in the past, but with the way baseball, you had the Holbrook era, and say what you want, he got 5 years, and we all know Chad Holbrook, and we love him. You look back on it, maybe he could have, maybe they got rid of him too soon. I don't know. But you had a national championship level program, and it didn't make the postseason 2 out of the 5 years. And I think even Chad would tell you that that's when you're the guy that replaces the guy. That's what happens in athletics. Mark Kingston, that era, and I went back and forth. I didn't think they should have fired him after a super regional trip. And he kind of started, every time you thought that was it for him, he would bounce back. But at the end of the day, the standards of this program weren't being met over the course of his tenure. Of course, he had a COVID year that got canceled and some things like that. And I think everyone was pretty understanding of that. And I think he was given ample opportunity. And I wish him the best at Creighton. It's kind of funny because I didn't really know him until toward the end when I was involved with Carolina Rise and NIL. And we had the whole baseball team there for a while, NIL wise. And he's a nice guy. He's a good guy. Actually funny. He's funnier than people give him credit for. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Mark Kingston. We're here to talk about Paul Mainieri and Ray Tanner, obviously. The legendary coach, Ray Tanner. Not going to get into this athletic director debate about him. But if you look around, things are pretty good with South Carolina athletics. I know men's basketball is struggling, and we've talked about that. But a lot of good coaches in place, a lot of upward trajectory, and obviously this was one of his last hires in Mainieri coming in and taking this job. I am beyond happy that they are naming the field after Tanner. And here, there's a lot of reasons why. First of all, best coach ever in a men's sport. You have to say that now because Dawn Staley obviously has won 3 national championships, and that's good. That's all good. Won the first national championship in a team sport that is a traditional team sport. The only other previous national title was in women's track in '02. All the national championships that have taken place, plus a Final Four run, plus an SEC championship game appearance in football, plus a record-setting football win streak, or winning back-to-back 11 games. Records have fallen with football. All that's taken place since Ray Tanner stepped foot on this campus in 1997. And, I don't necessarily say that all the time that, magic happens and all that stuff is like this magical power of Ray Tanner. But I do think there's something to be said in an athletics department where a sport has a breakthrough and other sports start believing, and you see it other places. You do. And it has to be a sport that matters a lot. And baseball at South Carolina since the early 70s has mattered quite a bit. And so, he's been a part of Carolina athletics during the golden era, really, to be honest. And as athletic director, he was part of that. Some hires didn't work out, whatever. We're not here to debate that. As a baseball coach, though, his success was unrivaled. South Carolina had played for 2 national championships before in the 70s. He played for 4 of them, won 2 back to back, set all sorts of records, won the last one at Rosenblatt, turned around and called it. You can hear Stuart Lake tell the story. They're on the bus, and he drives by the new stadium and says, "Boys, we're coming back here to win it again next year." And sure enough, they did. And then the next year went all the way to the finals and just ran into a hot Arizona team and all that. So look, those were great times in Carolina athletics. Everything besides men's basketball was winning at the time too in the early 2010s. And just the belief that he brought to the table, the belief in this place. The Founders Park was his baby. I mean, that was he was promised that when he took the job and left his alma mater. And then as things go with construction sometimes, especially back then around the university and them trying to build a new arena, and there were 18 different plans in the city, all this stuff. And it finally got built. Eric Hyman finally built it, and it was as nice of a facility as there is, a stadium as there is in the country. Are there some things they're going to do to it to upgrade it? Yeah, definitely. Especially revenue things like boxes and stuff like that. But there are, luxury boxes there, suites, and it's a nice ballpark. And when it's packed and loud, there's not a better venue in the country, or not many. We could do the Coke taste test on that. But hats off to Ray Tanner, and we'll talk about that a lot. He's going to join us on our baseball special coming up later today. I got some special things to honor him and all that good stuff. I wanted to get that out of the way. Women's basketball team rolled Florida last night, and SC, Southern Cal. They don't like it when you call them Southern Cal, by the way. But I can't call them USC because everybody gets mad. I don't really call Carolina USC. And I guess I just prefer Carolina or Gamecocks. But I don't call the Trojans that either because y'all would quit listening. So SC, the Trojans, the West Coast SC, topped UCLA, who's the top ranked team in the country, 71-60 late last night on Peacock. And, are they going to drop UCLA now down to 4th because they lost a game by double digits, no doubt? I mean, I'm done with the polls. Okay. I'm done with these people that vote in the polls. I don't know what a lot of them are thinking. They're unfair. They cause poor perception of things. I mean, it's everybody. I'm like, common sense. And even when I take the Gamecocks out of it, I'm like, there's teams that drop all the way down, and I don't know. I'm just done with the polls. Anyway, I've talked 10 minutes about the baseball and the women's basketball, so now it's time to get the football topic, right? And what I want to talk about today, right before we came on Inside the Gamecocks, the show yesterday, the NFL Combine invites came out, and this is significant. Georgia and Texas, obviously, they recruit some no-brainer talent to those schools, and they both had 14 invites to the Combine. South Carolina has 11. It's the biggest group invited to the Combine since they've been tracking it. Now, the record for drafting is 9 Gamecocks drafted, but this was in 1954, where they had 30 rounds and 360 players selected in the draft. In 2013, which was coming off that really good 2012 team, 7 players were invited to the Combine. Since then, it's never been more than 5. So they more than doubled it, which shows you, that South Carolina's recruiting really well, even if the blue chip ratio or whatever the hell else says they're not, because you've got to bring in baseline talent to develop it. This is not some miracle with a bunch of guys that couldn't play coming in. These were players that were underrated. And now there has been great development. Don't get me wrong. But this is not a bargain hunting thing. This is not a find hidden gems. They've identified players that are good and then gotten the most out of them. And I think that's individually, we can talk team results and all that, but I just tried to adjust my seat and dropped my mic. This is not off to a good start today. Sorry, folks. I got a lot to do before the show coming up. And then I got a radio segment coming up later, but I want to give it my full attention here on coffee because that's what you guys expect, and that's what we're going to do. However, I mean, you look at the players invited to the combine. Nicky Manware, 3-star guy, camp eval. O'Donnell Fortune, 3-star guy, Muschamp recruit, camp eval. And you got to give the former staff credit too, because they brought some of these guys in. Not all, some. DeAndre Jules got invited to the combine. Now, that's not a guy that made a huge impact this year because of injuries, but I think we can all agree he's got talent. And it surprised me because sometimes, there's only so many spots for the combine. But him getting invited, I think, says a lot about like who he was on tape this past year. Kyle Kennard, of course, invited. Oh, by the way, DeAndre Jules, Taka Hemingway was a low 4-star player out of Conway. DeAndre Jules, mid 3-star out of Maryland, out of high school. Kyle Kennard, mid 3-star end out of Atlanta, out of high school. Demetrius Knight Jr., very happy for him, got invited. A low 3-star quarterback prospect out of Atlanta, out of high school. Bam Martin Scott, could not find a high school ranking on him. He was a 3-star JUCO. He's originally from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Rocket Sanders gets invited on offense, and he was a 4-star wide receiver prospect when he signed with Arkansas. TJ Sanders, obviously a great player, invited. Mid to high 3-star out of Marion, out of high school, class of 2021. Josh Simon, low 3-star prospect that signed with Western Kentucky, originally out of Sumter, Dalzell, over there in the Sumter area. And then Torricelli Simpkins could not find a rating on him. Transfer from North Carolina Central out of the Charlotte area, and he's invited on offense. So out of these players, though, 8 are on defense, and that's what I want to talk about primarily today. It's great, the combine, we'll see how these guys do. Hopefully this translates. And look, Kai Kroger is also invited to the specialist combine as a punter, and so he's a 12th player technically and could get drafted. So if the Gamecocks can get double digits it'll be the first time that's happened in the modern era. And I think it's a testament, but when you look at it, so, all right, if all these guys that got invited to the combine do get drafted, or like most of them, and then 1 or 2 more that aren't, because you can still get drafted if you don't go to the combine, if you have a good pro day or whatever. If all these guys get drafted, 8 of them are on defense. 8. And that's not including veteran players that have played for 3 or 4 years, and a leader of the team in Boogie Huntley, and a leader of the team in Debo Williams. So outside of the talent, you're losing some leadership too, right, on defense. And that has to, and there's holes on offense as well with Rocket and Josh Simon, and Torricelli Simpkins is leaving, for Sean Lee is all. So there's holes on that side as well. But the defense, if you're looking at it from 10,000 feet, you're looking and saying, this group got gutted. How are they going to replace all these guys? Well, the same way other schools replace them. You recruit and you hit the portal. But this when you look at this and you kind of see that the combine invites don't validate the talent as much as getting drafted and, of course, performing well in the NFL. But that shows that for the people that get paid big money to evaluate college talent and invite the players to the combine, this is their job, the scouts, that they're impressed with collectively this group. I mean, 8 defensive players. Some of these guys didn't start. I mean, Demetrius Knight and Bam Martin Scott rotated. So DeAndre Jules didn't start. Taka Hemingway sometimes didn't start. So very interesting, or very, very flattering. Now, it's good and bad. We worry about next season, Of course, I'm not saying worry, but these are questions that have to be answered this offseason. Who's going to replace these guys? But what this does, if you have a big draft class and you start doing it consistently, and South Carolina's had some big draft moments. Obviously, players like J.C. Horn and Stephon Gilmore going in the top 10 have certainly helped. Torian Gray and his track record of getting guys drafted helps in recruiting. Clowney going number 1 overall certainly helped back in the day. Recruits pay more attention to this than wins. Like, and I'm not talking about collective winning, because obviously if you lose and have a losing season and not the culture, but the feeling around the program is trending down, that does negatively impact your recruiting class. Although the 2024 class South Carolina signed, technically signed right after they finished 5-7, and is going to be could be historic. Really, I mean, it's already historic in some ways because some of these guys were one and dones, but so it may affect you later on, and I think 5-7 affected 2025 for a while. But individual wins, some people think, yeah, and you go to game, and all of us out here, we go to the game or we watch the game, and we're like, God, it's devastating to lose. I mean, it sucks for me. And that has nothing to do with my favorite team winning or losing. That more has to do with work and reaction and dealing with it. And it's tough. And I can imagine how the players and coaches feel. But recruits, as long as they have a good time, they don't really care. I mean, remember those of you that didn't play high school football, and I know some of you did, and you were on the field, but remember when you used to go to the game in high school when you were a kid? I was disappointed, at times when they lose in the playoffs or something at Burns. But and I played up until junior year, because I wanted to go to another game. But honestly, even as somebody that loved football and stuff, and my friends, we went to the game and had a good time. It was all that mattered. You're young. Now in college, that's a different story. Carolina was a different story. you wanted to win. Now we also love the party though, and generally I took losses back then a lot better than I do as an adult. But my point is, young people, it's not winter, and then it's not do or die every Saturday like it is for the people invested. They're trying to figure out where they want to play. I mean, you have a big crowd and a great atmosphere. I'll remind everybody, South Carolina won a hell of a recruiting battle with Nick Harbor against Oregon. His official visit was that Georgia disaster game in 2022. National TV, noon kickoff, stadium was empty by the second half. Yet they still got him. Why? Because he had a good time. So wins and losses aren't what affects this stuff, though. You can roll out and say, hey, I can get you to the league if you're a 3-star. I can get you to the league if you're a 4-star. A 5-star, doesn't matter. Development. And that's big. Why is Georgia such an attractive option outside of the reasons they've always been? But under Kirby Smart, why do they get attention from around the country from high-level recruits? Because they stack the NFL with players. And they see these guys get drafted and play on Sundays and get big money, and that matters. And it matters these days, even kids that have agents, it matters. So this helps your recruiting more than anybody, but it puts you in kind of a pickle when you're trying to reload for next year. And so that's the point with that. So how do they reload? And Clayton White and his staff have a lot of work on their hands. There are some guys that we just listed here, namely Fortune and Hemingway, TJ Sanders, essentially, those Bam Martin Scott, those guys have been with Beamer and been on the team since Beamer got here. And Nicky Memore started in 2022 with the program. So these are veteran guys, not to mention Debo Williams was class of 2021, and Huntley Boogie, who's not invited to the combine, but who's still a loss leadership-wise and talent-wise, rotation-wise. He inherited Huntley from Muschamp. And so you're not only losing a lot of talent and starters and significant players, you're losing leadership. And so there's a talent I don't want to say deficit, but there's talent to replace. There's leadership to replace, and there's depth to replace. Last year's defense was really deep, by comparison, just about at every position. And I'm focusing on the defense today because, like I said, we'll address the offense. We've addressed certain positions, so how do you do it? How do you replace all these guys? With the leadership part of it, got to step up. That happens in the off season, happens in the weight room. I mean, Demetrius Knight Jr., big leader on the team, even though he was here for a year, an older go-to guy. So somebody's going to have to emerge leadership wise back then. Maybe it's Dylan Stewart. Maybe it's Jelon Kilgore. Maybe it's Fred Johnson as a sophomore. Maybe it's one of the newcomers. But the leadership wise, and then the depth, I think it's going to take care of itself. I think you're trying to get a certain number with the rotation at edge and D tackle, and you need depth at linebacker, and you got depth in the secondary. But does it have to be all known guys? No. I mean, you kind of blend it together, and it's not as sure. I don't think it's as sure of a thing. Bringing in Xavion Hardy and Gabriel Brownlow-Dendy and Devontae Miles, as it was to add Jules and Goodwine to the three vets from South Carolina, Tonka and Boogie and TJ. That's not as sure of a thing. Doesn't mean it can't get there. So replacing DeAndre Jules, that's hard. There's not a lot of guys like him, body type wise and things like that in the program. So that would be a question mark for me. As far as did they replace him with either portal or high school with a player that can, that could do the same types of things. With TJ Sanders, I'm thinking Brownlow-Dendy probably is that type of guy. Jules is like 320, so I'm just not seeing it right now with some. Maybe they pick somebody like that up, but I mean, honestly, DeAndre Jules was hurt most of the season and didn't play. He wasn't, he was a good player, but he didn't impact the success or not of the defense a whole lot because of his injury situation. With Demetrius Knight, I think Justin Okoronkwo fits that bill. By the way, they released the heights and weights and jersey numbers for the portal guys, and Justin's 6'3", 215 officially. So really good frame for Justin Okoronkwo. Now, when I say player, in Justin's case, and all these guys, I don't necessarily mean they're going to match the production that, what happens on the field is going to be determined by a lot of things. What I mean by this is it's a similar type of player. Justin Okoronkwo has a lot of speed, just like Demetrius Knight. He's taller, leaner, lankier, 6'3", 215. That's a frame, but he's fast, and so that was a big part of Demetrius Knight's game. That and his age and leadership, tenacity, and those are all the things I can't determine. But just as far as similar player, Justin would do there. So who's going to replace O'Donnell Fortune, OD Fortune? How are we going to replace O'Donnell? The same thing, way we do it every year. Next man up in the secondary, Torian Gray, has a track record now at South Carolina, because I always talk about his track record at Virginia Tech, Florida, and the NFL. At South Carolina now, O'Donnell is going to be the fourth corner drafted in 3 drafts. That's pretty stellar. And there's been a lot of good corners in this program. And I don't know, a lot of people weren't sold on O'Donnell Fortune last offseason. Just like I'm sure a lot of people won't be sold on Judge Collier this off season, or maybe not even Fakari Swain or Brandon Cisse. I mean, these guys all tend to get better, and when it's their time to go out there and shut down one side of the field, they do it. Now, Judge is going into his 3rd year, so not his 4th. So, there's not that next man up type of guy like O'Donnell, like Marcellus Dial, and then like Cam Smith, and those guys before. But I do think that, if you're looking at, Judge Collier is probably going to start at one spot. So replacing him, Swain is tops on my list. And then probably Brandon Cisse would be from NC State, depending on where he ends up playing. If he's a nickel and they move Kilgore back, then maybe it's Miles Norwood, who's 6'1", 183, according to the release. So one of those guys, who replaces TJ Sanders? I mentioned Xavion Hardy, probably is best fit, the best fit for that role. He's 6'5", 290 now listed. He's probably could play at 300. Long armed, quick twitch, athletic. My question with him would be, because TJ Sanders was such a strong player by the time he left, is he that? What's the strength like? And those gains can be made, gains, bro, gains in the off-season weight program. But that would be who I would say would be a similar player with Tonka Hemingway. I think it's Devontae Miles, and Miles, of course, is about 2.5, 3 inches taller than Tonka, built differently, more of a long arm. A lot of big, taller, long arm D tackles now in the program. I wonder if that's kind of the model. But he's twitchy like Tonka and uses more of his athleticism than his power like Tonka. I would be shocked if he scores defensive touchdowns and all that. But if you're looking for a similar player, I wouldn't project him to start either. I mean, but if you're looking for a similar player, that would probably be where he would fit. Devontae Miles, Nick Eamon-Waring, it just depends on what they decide to do. I could see a world where Jelon Kilgore slides back, and that's Nick's replacement, and then they're replacing the nickel. I could also see a world where they just let a lot of different players battle it out for the other safety spot. You have Peyton Williams, David Boosie, coming in. You have the other Kilgore, Gerald Kilgore, who's a good player. Don't forget, I say this all the time about Zabari Sandy, who's coming back from injury. Kelvin Hunter. I mean, there's a lot of options back there. They didn't sign a safety out of the portal. But then out of high school, they do have a lot of, some Nick Eamon-Waring types. So I will name one guy, but he's coming in from the high school ranks. He's already there. That's Kendall Daniels Jr. from Virginia. I've talked about him. He's 6'4", 205. And that's kind of about what Nick was when he came in. And then you've got some freaky tall D-backs in the 2026 class as well. Plus Chris Hatfield out of Lincolnton, Georgia, who's not enrolled yet because of high school graduation dates. He will be there. And he's kind of an under the radar guy, but he's about 6'4". So, there are replacements in the pipeline for Nick. I just don't know about this season. I don't really know that Kendall Daniels will go out there and start as a true freshman. Maybe he will. I can't rule it out. And the more I think about him, the more I'm kind of like, yeah, this guy could end up not surprising. He was a top 247 player, but, could be an instant type of impact guy, at least on special teams. Who replaces Kyle Kennard? We had a video on that here on Coffee. And the answer is, I don't know. But I know you got Dylan Stewart on the other side, and there's a lot of options. Everybody from JT Gear to Desmond Umazulu to Jalen Brown, who's coming in from the portal. If you're looking for a guy from the portal that's kind of similar, that has that kind of size upside, it would be Brown. As far as who's similar to Kennard or what Kennard was, it's Brown. Will he be it this year? I don't know. He's young. And then Bam Martin Scott. I've got two thoughts here, and they didn't. I don't think they necessarily, unless you count Okoronkwo for him too. Bam Martin Scott, what was great about him was as a linebacker, he was good, a good tackler, but his specialty really was pass rush. And Clayton White loves to send his linebackers, and Bam Martin Scott was very skilled at that. I mean, he could have put his hand down and rushed, and I don't remember accurately if he ever did in a certain package or whatever. But that's what the pros love about him, that and his length. I mean, he's a good player. I mean, the NFL, he could get drafted. No, what do they say? No cap these days, the kids. Anyway, so I think Jerron Willis, though, is the player that can kind of replace him. And if they go to the three linebacker set, or three down set like they did last year, from time to time. I mean, 2023, they kind of started using that as their base toward the end, and that was smart. 2024, they didn't use it a whole lot. Um, but Bam Martin Scott was a good fit in that. And then if you remember in 23, when they went out to A&M and started implementing that, Jerron was kind of Bam Martin Scott's other guy when they played the three linebackers, and he did some nice things. And that's kind of his specialty too, kind of a linebacker pass rusher type. Clayton White loves those type of guys. So I'll go out on a limb and say Jerron Willis, while also being honest and saying I don't know that they'll play a whole lot of three down next year. And I certainly am not projecting that whoever wins one of the linebacker spots rotate. I don't foresee necessarily there being a constant rotation like there was with Knight and BMS, uh, with Jerron Willis. I think he's more of a specialty player. Maybe I'm wrong, but that would be my opinion right now. Boogie Huntley, the leadership obviously can't be replaced. It just kind of depends on who gets in the rotation. But the leadership can't be replaced. I mean, he was obviously here for a long time. And then Debo Williams, another leader. I believe Fred Johnson will take his place. I think Fred Johnson's more talented than Debo Williams. Does he have as much experience? Fred Johnson's a massive, fast, long linebacker. Um, Debo was not, but Debo was in the box. He would tackle. He was tough, tenacity, worked harder than just about anybody I've ever seen at Carolina. Of course, I find myself saying that a lot about a lot of these players, how hard they work, and they do. But I think it'll be Fred Johnson there. What to make of Sean Murphy, JC? Sean Murphy could be a starter at linebacker if Justin Uncle maybe isn't ready. I can see Sean at 6'3", 230. That's what he measured in at. Being a guy. He's been productive. He's not, the reason I didn't say, well, he'll slide in at D Knight's spot. Like I said, what I'm talking about here is similar types of skill sets rather than instant starter. And so Justin would fit more with that. But Murphy, could start. He's not as fast as Demetrius Knight. That's just plain and simple. Bottom line, not many linebackers are, but he's talented and he's good. I mean, you're talking about two linebackers South Carolina brought in from the portal that Nick Saban evaluated according to his critical factors and recruited to Alabama. We talk about Alabama all the time. Everybody just thinks they signed 5 stars. They signed the right top ranked guys. Their evaluation process with him was unreal. And that's what the great ones do. Kirby Smart can evaluate. That staff at Georgia, if you look at some of as well as they recruited, you look at some of the under the radar guys they've brought in, Lad McConkey, Jordan Davis. I mean, they can evaluate as well. But so that's hope. Nick Saban's missed too through the years on players, but this will be the third one that he got at Alabama that South Carolina's gotten. And no, and some of you may be confused. Murphy did spend last year at Florida State, was hurt most of the year, had 15 tackles, I think, in 4 games. So this will be the third one. Monkel Goodwine worked out pretty well, even though he didn't have many stats coming over, and he'll probably start this year. So that gives you hope with Justin Uncle and Sean Murphy. You got 2 linebackers Saban and they talked to Saban about Sean Murphy. Saban's retired. He's helping coaches and doing his thing now. So I think he's an honest broker when it comes to player evaluation, and so that gives you hope. That gives you hope. But there's a lot of work to do on this defense. I think that there's a couple of keys to next season. Number one, get the personnel right. Number two, have some leadership develop, because there were some dudes that did not like losing on that D. So no matter how talented you are, if you don't have the heart and you can't handle the adversity, like this defense did from time to time, or a lot of the time last year, you spot the ball, like Clayton White says, then you're not going to be very good. Offenses these days, especially in the league, in the SEC, are too good. I mean, they will even as good as South Carolina's defense was last year. Think about the Missouri game and how when Brady Cook got into a rhythm, and there were plays that they kind of caught him off guard with, and they weren't good at stopping. That was a 34-30 football game. Think about Clemson in the short passing game. Illinois made some plays. It's LSU early in the season. I mean, the days of being able to just go out there and dominate on D, I don't see them anymore. You can win quote unquote ugly, play low scoring game. Tennessee did that last year. As good as much as they've lit up the scoreboard through the years, they basically handed the ball to Sampson really fast and ran the ball and grinded it out and played D. That was kind of how they won 10 games last season. It was different. But you better have, if you are planning to win that way, you better have a good running game on offense, and complement that. Otherwise, like I said, the players are too good in this league to expect shutouts every game, and this was a very, very good defense. And 10 players I just listed are leaving. So we'll find out, that this portal class, uh, the staff deserves the benefit of the doubt because they've hit on just about every portal guy they've brought in, and there's some good material to work with here. And then there's players coming back whenever you have Dylan Stewart, which by the way, I mentioned the Bam Martin Scott role. I wonder if they won't move Dylan around a little bit next year and get him matched up in passing situations as an outside linebacker type. He did it in high school. You got Jelon Kilgore coming back, who's a Grizzly veteran now. DQ Smith obviously has been here a long time. They love him. People that want to. There's some folks out there that want to replace DQ, and I'm not saying DQ had his best season last year. Not that he was a weak link, but there were times it didn't have. But they love that guy. He's not. There's a leader for the defense. And then Judge Collier's back. I mentioned Vakari Swain, Fred Johnson. There is a nice nucleus, and that's refreshing. Because in some years, folks, South Carolina sending 11 guys to the combine, they may get 10, 12 drafted. It's like, oh, that's going to suck for next year. Uh, Hell, they lost a lot of guys after 2022, and if it hadn't been for some injuries and some unforeseen circumstances, they'd have had at least a decent season that year. But they got their work cut out for them on D. I mean, there's questions on offense as well, and everybody's going to be focused on Lenore Sellers and running backs and receivers, and rightfully so. That's fun, but it's more fun to talk about skill positions and stats and stuff like that than it is to talk about the defense. But there is hope that they can replace these guys, and I wanted to kind of give my take on it with the caveat: there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees here, but that there are some guys with similar skill sets, some guys that they've gotten good recommendations on that they were thorough with from the portal that can help, and then also some high school players that could step in and guys that redshirted or were injured last year. So it's not like the cupboard is bare, but there's a lot of unknown and a lot of questions that have to be answered. All right, I gotta get off. I gotta get ready for this baseball extravaganza later today. I said I wouldn't call it an extravaganza, but that's the best way I know how to put it. We'll have Paul Maneri, we'll have Ray Tanner, Stuart Lake, all the players we normally have. Grayson Griner, John Whittle, JB. I think Derek Scott will be by. Phil Mad Dog Mullinax is in Columbia. Took off to go down there last night. Spent the night so you could get up early and grind and set up. Live from Founders Park, they will be. And just like last year, but this is a very special opening day in baseball. It's a good day to be a Gamecock. Good day to be a Gamecock. All right, folks. Coffee signing off. I did not mention encapsulate. I will just save that for the next episode on Monday. You folks have a really wonderful weekend. Happy Valentine's Day. Love the one you're with. I'm out.